Hello, this is Neil Gust from Heatmiser, and you're listening to the LSQ podcast.
Hey, I'm Jenny LSQ. Thank you for checking out this episode of the LSQ podcast. I remember back in the mid-90s when I first got into Elliott Smith's music and discovered that he also had a band. That band was called Heatmiser, and they were putting out amazing music as well. Especially, for me, a favorite from Heatmiser was their 1996 album Mike City Sons, an album I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of times over the years. I still return to it often. And they have just put out a deluxe 30th anniversary edition of it via Jack White's label Third Man Records that includes demos of tunes from the album, previously unreleased recordings from those sessions, and even a full band version of Elliott's solo tune Christian Brothers. It was awesome getting to talk with Heatmiser's singer and guitarist and co-songwriter Neil Gust about the making of Mike City Sons, what went right and what went wrong. By the time the album came out, they had all but broken up. And also about the making of Heatmiser, which was Neil and Elliott and bassist Sam Coomes, also of Quasi, and drummer Tony Lash. So we delve into how Neil and Elliott first met as college classmates, initially playing in a band together they called Swimming Jesus before, as graduation approached, they came up with the idea for Heatmiser. And of course we also talk about Neil's own personal history as a guitarist and songwriter. Let's get it going. So Neil, of course I do want to talk about putting together this edition of the album, but I also, on this show, the thing that I like to do is delve into your life and music before this latest release, really go back. So we're going to go back
All
to
right.
your, early experiences as a creative person and what that looked like. But I do want to start by asking, in a very zoomed out way, when you started listening to this Heatmiser stuff, this Mike City Sons stuff, to begin to put this together, what was your most immediate feeling, of hearing and listening back to some of the previously unreleased stuff and revisiting the album? I'm assuming for the first time in a minute. What was your kind of prevailing feeling of what you remembered instantly about that time?
So, like 5 years ago, Tony Lash, the drummer in Heatmiser, and sort of our in-house producer, went back to some of the unreleased tracks and mixed them for the first time and sent them to me kind of out of the blue. And I'd had really bad rough mixes of those where they were really flat and just straight off the board, nobody did anything to them. And, I hadn't listened to that stuff in 20 years and I just thought it was terrible. But when he did these mixes 5 years ago, I was completely surprised by how cool it sounded and how much I liked it. I hadn't listened to Mike City Sons for decades. And it was exciting that, and a surprise, that stuff that we left off the record sounded as cool as that. And it opened up this possibility of finishing the record, and by that, I don't mean changing the original album. I just mean like following through with our delivery. Because when we finished the record, we just kind of dropped it and then bailed.
Yeah, because by the time the album was totally finished, y'all had decided it was over, right? You sort of broke up before it came out.
Well, not exactly. I mean, we delivered it to the record label and then we just stopped. And there was no like, oh, it's over conversation until a year later. But this was kind of just how dysfunctional the band was and how confusing it was to really know what was going on. We ended up going on tour for like a week and a half or something, but Tony had left, our drummer. And so we got our friend John Moen to play, and those shows were not memorable.
Okay, we're going to come back to talking about that album and about Heatmiser, but yes, I want to rewind for you, looking back to truly like childhood. Like, what do you remember about your earliest inklings of creativity?
Well, I always loved records as a little kid, and I loved playing with my little toy record player. And I started playing guitar as soon as I could. I was 8 years old. And I had older brothers and older cousins from Chicago who were really into rock music, and there were always records around. And my mom had pulled the tubes out of the television. She hated it. And so we didn't have television. And I had just had music in my life at an early age as kind of the main thing for what we did.
What were you listening to on your little record player?
My little record player would be like the Beatles and Three Dog Night, Simon and Garfunkel. I remember Little Willie by The Sweet, and those are the ones I can remember.
And where were you growing up?
I grew up in Iowa City,
Mm-hmm.
Iowa, but I had to work on my dad's farm. My folks split up right when I was born, and me and my brothers and sisters who lived with my mom had to join my brothers and sisters who lived with my dad in Fargo, North Dakota, every summer to work on my dad's farm.
Oh, wow.
And there was, I mean, we just played music all the time. I mean, that was the only thing there was, the flattest landscape. It was really sort of a grim place to be for me.
And then how did you acquire a guitar at age 8?
I think one of my mom's friends offered to get me guitar lessons. My mom was a nurse, and she was really cool, and she had cool friends. So through that, I borrowed this friend's guitar and started taking lessons. And then my mom had a sister, my aunt, who had a music store, and she got a discount nylon string guitar, and it was mailed, and I remember it arriving. And I played this nylon string guitar for until I was 14, and that's when I bought my first electric guitar with my own money.
And what about sort of music of the day? I mean, you mentioned like as a littler kid listening to, Beatles and stuff like that, but once it's getting into like, the later 70s and into the 80s and stuff like that, what was the kind of contemporary shit on the radio that really leapt out at you initially?
Well, I liked what my older brothers and cousins liked. So that was Aerosmith and the Guess Who, and kind of like the poppier rock, Boston, Cheap Trick, Foreigner.
Yeah, good shit.
But also like Black Sabbath and the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin. And the big change for me was on the farm. My oldest brother had a subscription to Rolling Stone, and I had to wait until he was done reading it, and then we would devour it. And I remember when they were freaking out over REM. That's how I found out about REM. Started listening to that, and that just opened up a whole new avenue. And I was kind of at the right age to seize a whole new world of music for my own.
Had you started writing songs yourself by that point?
As soon as I got an electric guitar when I was 14, I started coming up with stuff. And I was in a band in eighth grade. And from then on, I was in a band.
And were there shows, I mean, like before you got to college when you were just in the playing electric guitar and starting to write songs phase, and you had found REM. So I'm guessing that helped catalyze this, like, realizing you're a freak kind of thing. I mean, are kind of not a freak, freak in a good way, obviously. But was that, during those high school years, were you sort of like discovering, more counterculture shit?
Of course. Well, I mean, I was also in the closet. So I had friends who were out, and that terrified me. And they were very brave for doing that in the early 80s in Iowa City. The thing that really opened up for me in Iowa City playing music was there was this program, a government sponsored program to keep kids off the street. I can't remember what it was called, but they would record bands on a 4 track. So, like, all the punk rock bands went to this house where these punk rock kids were getting money from the government to record them. And it blew my mind. It was the coolest thing. It was everything I wanted to do so badly. And it just kind of instilled in me a lifelong love of recording.
Fascinating. I mean, so was it just slightly older kids?
Yeah, they were like college kids. Iowa City is where the University of Iowa is, and it's a very sports-centered town with Iowa Hawkeyes, which sucks if you're gay or into anything other than sports. But it's also the place where the Iowa Writers Workshop is. And so there was a subculture that was really strong and exciting. And I wanted to be part of that really badly. And that's how I got in, was finding this place where they recorded bands.
So when you got to college with this background, were you thinking that music was going to be a thing that you could quote unquote pursue?
Absolutely. I thought I was going to study it. And then I hated the classes so much. And so did Elliott. Like, just couldn't stand them.
They like the technical classes and stuff.
Yeah. And it just, they weren't very good. They weren't, it just didn't satisfy what we were craving out of it. So we just studied other things. I mean, I picked my major based on the classes that I came out of feeling most awake, and those were American history classes. So I studied American history.
I mean, rewinding a tiny bit there, what do you remember about your first encounters with Elliott? You know, what did you bond over when you first met?
I remember just noticing him because he looked as awkward as I felt. And it was just very easy. We just kind of fell into a friendship right away. And I think it was all about music. We just had a common language, and he was a very nice and thoughtful guy. He was funny. He wasn't obnoxious, and he wasn't like performative. Like, I was from the Midwest, and arriving in the East Coast, just confronted with these characters who had these big lives coming from Boston and New York City. And I was really intimidated. And I think he was too. And so, I was comfortable with someone who's more like set back, like I felt.
I don't know if this came up at all from Kenny, but I figure it's worth saying in case it didn't come up that Elliott and I were friends. We were pretty close when he lived in New York.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So just wanted to verbalize that for what it's worth. So I mean, I loved that guy, and we spent, really a lot of time together during that period of time between like 96 and when he started to be here in LA all the time and wasn't around as much. But yeah, I mean, it's impossible to articulate what was so dynamic about him in ways that folks who only know his reputation wouldn't expect. But he definitely was instantly someone you wanted to spend time with.
Yeah. It was easy, and he was really good. Like, when we would play together, it was amazing.
You talked about, so it was initially when you were playing together, you were doing kind of a more acoustic type of thing. What were the kind of touchstone inspirations for you in the music you were starting to make together? What were the sort of references?
Elvis Costello, Tom Waits, REM, AC/DC. That was kind of the first group.
And so would you say that the early songs you were working on together kind of had shades of that sound, or was it just aspiration?
No,
No. What did it
no.
what did it sound like?
I mean, his songs were really weird. They were complicated and it was like a string of train cars, like this part, then this part, then this part, then this part, and this part. And they were difficult to memorize and hard to kind of penetrate. And mine were very modular, like verse, chorus, verse, and simple. And I tended to gravitate toward rhythmic things, and he was very much about melody. So I think that was a thing that we had to come to understand about each other, but it was also kind of the thing that was nice, because he wasn't coming to me with songs that had a lot of groove to them, but I could provide that. And I wasn't melodically sophisticated at all compared to him. So he sort of showed me he opened me up to that.
As you were approaching the end of school, as you mentioned, you ended up studying American history, but you were doing music the entire time. Were you thinking that, because I know Heatmiser formed once you were both in Portland, but was there any glimmer of, once this is over, let's keep playing music together? Or what was your sort of attitude about how you were going to continue to pursue music after college?
Well, the summer before our last year in school, we were at a Fourth of July party at our friend Mark Swanson's house in Boston. Do you know Mark?
I do love him.
Okay. So we were at a Fourth of July party, and this is where we decided that once school was over, we would be in a band together. It was super exciting, and that's also like when I told him I was gay. He was the first person I had ever told that, and it was a really intense fucking day. And it also really bonded us because it meant that we were serious. I like, for the first time, he knew who I was, and I knew who he was based on his reaction to me, which was really perfect. He was empathetic and generous and really kind. So the whole end of school was there. I didn't have a stress about what the fuck are we going to do now, because we knew what we were going to do. And while we were living together, we just were writing songs and working on stuff together and putting together a plan to go to Portland and join his friend Tony, who was a drummer. And we knew what we were going to do. It was great.
And had Tony started like learning recording stuff yet at that point? Because I know that's really what.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was doing that when he was a little kid. He's got one of the most sophisticated ears of anybody I've met. So yeah, he was already, I mean, he was engineering Poison Idea records, and I think that was his job. When we moved to Portland, I mean, I started working in a copy shop, and Tony made money recording music.
And so was it were these songs you were working, had you sort of decided, if not on a name yet, but is that group of songs you started working on like the first batch of Heatmiser songs?
Yeah, so Elliott named the band Heatmiser in college, and we thought the 80s were the time of irony, and we at the time really loved the name, and all our friends thought it was really funny, so we had the name, and we kept it once we went to Portland. So it was just a matter of finding a bass player and getting shows.
Were there any songs that sort of are familiar, ended up on, as early Heatmiser songs that you already had then? What are some of those?
Oh yeah, like Can't Be Touched, Cannibal, Dirt, I think Candyland maybe.
Mm.
The newer ones right before our first record were like Don't Look Down, Blackout, and Still.
Mm.
And the Blackout and Still were two of, like, as far as I was concerned, like the best songs that Elliott had written at that time. I just was blown away by how cool they were. And like the whole time that we were playing together, I wanted to level up, because Elliott was really good at his instrument. And, he hadn't found his voice yet, but he wrote a lot really fast. And he was just a sophisticated musician from an early age.
What was the process like? Because obviously in the Heatmiser catalog, there are the Neil songs and there are the Elliott songs. But were you collaborating on them in the room together, or bringing in something you had started? How did all of that work?
So the first couple records are more collaborative. For example, Cannibal was a song that I sang, and then I bailed on it, and he came up with different lyrics and a different melody. But the entire song and arrangement was something that had started as one of my songs. And then Can't Be Touched was something that he'd started and then bailed on. And I took over and wrote new parts for it and sang it. And then other songs, we just left room for each other to play guitar. So that's what that kind of the first era of Heatmiser was like. But then once he started making solo records and we bought the studio and I was in there by myself and he was off touring, we just weren't writing our songs together. There's some stuff where, like, Christian Brothers on his second solo record was more collaborative between me and him than, say, Rest My Head Against the Wall on Mike City Sons, where Elliott's not even on that song. So it became more separate, but there's still, like, to me, the thing that, to go back to an earlier question that you had about how I felt when Tony started sending me these new mixes, what I heard was the band. And I had a perspective on it that I didn't at the time. At the time, I just thought we were falling apart and I didn't hear us as a unit. And when I went back after Tony sent these songs, I could hear the band and I could hear how cool we could be.
So when you arrived to the point of you're getting ready to make Mike City Sons, tell me a bit about, yeah, going into it, what you knew you wanted to do, or obviously you brought in some producers that you hadn't worked with before for that. Tell me a bit about the setting of it and kind of the ideas that y'all had going into making the album.
Well, we had always really been into recording ourselves, and it was expensive to do it. So we wanted to have our own studio. That was always like the pie in the sky goal, and we did it. It was really exciting when we got that check and cashed it and went and bought stuff and found this house and started putting thrift store furniture into it and setting up, sound baffles and some, putting like egg carton foam on the walls and on the ceiling and carpeting the whole thing and setting up a place to just, this was ours and we could record, we could take as long as we needed to. That was really thrilling, but it was also a massive learning curve. And, it was a mixed blessing, it was what we always wanted, but then we had to do it. And by the time we came to doing it, tensions were high. There was a lot of, excitement to do things in a certain way. And that wasn't like, people had different ideas about what it should be. But also there was like this fear, like, we're not sure how this stuff works. So getting it to work at the speed that we wanted it to happen was frustrating because it just took longer. And then on top of that, there were competing ideas for what things should, like really technical things. Not looking back, I can see like we were all on the same page, but like the technical things mattered so much at the time that they would explode into these ridiculous confrontations, and then we would be set back and have to get back together and try again. And Elliott had, by then, Margaret Middleman as his manager, who also bought his publishing. So her husband was Rob Schnapf, and Rob and his producing partner, Tom Rothrock, really wanted to work with Elliott. So it was through that Elliott came back to the band and said, I think we should get these guys to come help us. And at that point, it was like, okay, whatever is going to work. And we were able to finish a record. Like, we were able to focus and not fight and have fun with it, actually, because it did get really fun.
And what were the particular songs that immediately felt like, oh shit, like this is the good, we're getting there, this is the stuff.
I mean, Sam hates Get Lucky, but when we started playing Get Lucky, I was like, this rocks. This is going to be great. And when I heard Plainclothes Man, I knew that was really special. And I knew Half Right was really special. But I also thought See You Later was going to be the first single. I was like, this is it. Like the way that I had thought bands worked was that it took 3 records. Your first record, you get it out of your system. The second record, you change it up. But on your third record, you kind of have to nail it. You have to arrive at something. And See You Later to me was like, okay, we did it. It was collaborative and it was really cool to me.
Yeah.
So those were Elliott's. My own ones, I'd lost my confidence and I didn't have a lot of support. And I thought Dirty Dream was really good, but there didn't seem to be a lot of interest from Elliott on that one. So then when I did Rest My Head Against the Wall, I thought, okay, that one really works. But the others were just hard to make. I didn't know if it was any good or not. I just didn't know.
Low Flying Jets is a banger.
Thanks.
I mean, I feel like that's one of the bangers from that album for sure.
You know, it was there was weird tunnel vision going in this process. It was very emotional and uncommunicative. And there were periods where it really sucked and periods where it was really joyful and just fucking awesome. When we finished it, and it was really when we went and made the video for Plainclothes Man that it kind of, we were in LA and we were out of Portland, and suddenly I saw all of Elliott's support. And I was like, we're done. Like I just could tell like that it was the band didn't have what he had, and it wasn't going to come to us. Like it wasn't being offered to us. And everybody just shifted their attention to Elliott. I understood why. I loved those songs too, but I didn't want my band to break up, and I was really bummed.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like maybe a kind of a looming awareness of that is what maybe you got in your head even during,
Sure.
as you say, the process of not having confidence in your songs, that there is this sense of foreboding or something.
For sure.
Yeah. But tell me about one of the joyful moments. What's something that you still remember super fondly as an experience during the making of that album?
Just getting the studio to work was really cool. And the times that like a recording would work out were just totally thrilling. I still, you know, I wish that well, I've said this in an interview before that I just wish I could go back and tell myself like, just do your work, like just show up and do your work. Don't get bogged down in these feelings. They don't matter. It was really fun. The 2 weeks that Elliott and I spent doing overdubs after Rob and Tom went back to California for Thanksgiving, because it by then we knew what we had and we knew what we had to do, and it was fun. We just had a very easy time working 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. That was probably the best. And we were doing overdubs for like most of the songs.
And what would you say was the main thing as a fellow songwriter and friend of Elliott's that you learned feels like it probably not doesn't sum up the dynamic, but in terms of the way he approached songwriting and making his songs, were there any things you kind of took from that are salient?
The things that I admired about Elliott's songs were the poetry and the melody and the way that his words would, the way that if you just heard the music, you would know what it felt like, and the words would follow that, like so it worked together in a way where they elevate each other. That's what I mean by like the poetry of it, where it all kind of walks at a slant from a straight narrative, and it just has, you feel it. That's what I take from Elliott's writing.
And have you been working on music, recently, or what does your musical pursuit look like in 2025?
I go through periods where I work on it a lot and then stop. And since I've been working on this reissue, I've been doing a lot of video because that's how I make my living. But it's also, as I've gotten older, it's really where the core of my interest as an artist is in the combination of music and visuals. So I've been working on a lot of Heatmiser video. The next thing will just be more of that by myself.
Well, thanks so much for getting together to do this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Neil for that interview, and go get a copy of the 30th anniversary edition of Mike City Sons on vinyl at thirdmanrecords.com. I appreciate the time you spent listening to episode 125 of the LSQ podcast. You can find more episodes at jennylsq.com and on podcast platforms. You can reach me with questions or feedback. On socials, I'm at JennyLSQ, and by email, it's lsqpod@gmail.com.